Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to this webinar. My name is Byron Noble, and I'll be organizer for the session. With me today is Stefan Zergen. I have a short video I'd like to play just before handing over to our presenter.
Plumbers are excluded from the Occupational Health and Safety Act 1993 pressure equipment regulations. However, an exception thereto allows plumbers to install geysers up to 450 litres, provided they're installed according to SANS 10254 and manufactured according to SANS 151. In celebration of World Toilet Day, Articulated offers a 10% discount on the SANS 10254 electric water heater course. Visit IOPSA training today to book your online course and learn not only what the SANS 10254 requirements are, but also why they are.
Thank you, Byron, and a very big, warm good morning to our listeners. My name is Steve Van Zyl, and I am the IOPSA National Technical Manager. Today's topic is going to be on corrosion and plumbing, and I really look forward to sharing the few things that I see and experience in the plumbing industry relating specifically to corrosion and its different colors. Let's have a look at the lineup and what I will be speaking to you about in today's session. Next slide. So let's look at the discussion points today. I'm going to be speaking to a few of those examples or things that could be speeding up corrosion. We're going to be discussing what could be causing the water to turn a different color. For example, blue, brown and yellow, white or cloudy or milky. We're going to look at aerators and the filter deposits, the value of them, the telltale signs that they give us. And then basically I'm going to be summing it up. But before we get into the different colors, let's have a look at things that can speed up corrosion in plumbing and pipes and components. And remember, today's session is to give you some basic guidelines as to what the color in water can be signaling to you as a professional as you attempt to fault find and find reasons behind the various changes in water color. It's not going to cover every shade of color in your fault finding, and remember, you may require a bit more in-depth investigation, some water tests and additional considerations that you may need to take into account. Next slide. So knowing or having an idea of what accelerates corrosion within plumbing or the plumbing system can be most valuable and useful in your fault finding process. So let's have a look at those things that are accelerators, those things that add to corrosion. Right on the top of the list, and in no specific given order, basically an accelerator is the use of dissimilar metal, which is basically galvanic action. You'll see I've highlighted. We will be chatting a little bit more about that as the slides go on. So the use of dissimilar metal means basically one metal might be stronger than another metal or less noble than another metal. And you'll find that there's some corrosion or galvanic action that happens. Heat is a big accelerator, so the hotter the water, as an example, the higher the chances are of corrosion. Think of solar when I speak about that, but also think about things where the water's not that hot, and you may then have the growth of bacteria, which can also accelerate corrosion. High water velocity through pipes is definitely an accelerator. I've put an example. I was trying to explain this to my daughter by thinking of a car wash. So if you go to a car wash and it's just normal high water and you're doing a spray and you're cleaning the car. Now imagine that velocity had doubled or tripled, and you might actually be stripping off the paint on your car. And as soon as you take off that protective coating and think of a pipe, you're removing the protective coating, suddenly that high water velocity starts to strip away at that, and you'll get then bare metal, and that bare metal then starts to corrode. A pH of less than 7 indicates acidity. And as we know, the more acidity, the more corrosive it becomes. Think about putting a nail into, for example, vinegar or a bit more acidy type of water that corrodes slightly faster than if it's on the alkaline side of things. Water quality plays a huge role in corrosion. And we'll have a look at H&S, which is hard water and soft water. Electrolysis or stray current. So if you haven't properly earthed and bonded a geyser, As an example, you'll find that there might be some stray current that's running. Stray current will then cause electrolysis to happen between pipes and fittings and components, and even play against things such as the acceleration of an anode. And then what happens is that that stray current then basically aids corrosion and speeds up the corrosion. Proximity to a sewer is also another one that speeds up corrosion. Stagnation, and I've put COVID-19, and it reminds me of the days when we all had to work from home and we were away from buildings, and buildings are living in things that need, a lot of people there using toilets, flushing water. And I could just ramble on about that they're living, but now suddenly in COVID-19, we were away from those buildings and there was a lot of water that was just stagnant. For months, maybe geysers just had water lying in it, pipes were just lying unutilized. And with that, as soon as you get stagnation, you find that there's growth of pathogens and corrosion starts to happen. The water itself changes chemically and it starts to corrode away at pipes and the metal and fittings and that kind of stuff. Sediment and hydraulic wear. The way I'd like to explain that to you, imagine a pipe that let's just say you've got a pipe in your hand and you've put some sand inside it and you've blocked it on either sides, maybe with your thumb, and you start moving it from left to right, and that sediment then starts to scrape or wear away, and that's called hydraulic wear. So think about it in a pipe where you've got water, and it's moving these particles along the pipe, and that's bouncing against the inside of a pipe, as an example. And as that happens, it almost causes like a sandblaster effect, or basically where it's got a sandpapering effect en route on the pipe, and that also strips away those coatings that are in a pipe, and that causes corrosion. The poor installation is something that's definitely, if you get something that's poorly installed or not installed according to the standards, it's definitely going to basically work for corrosion and not against corrosion. So let me try and think of an example. Poor installation or non-adherence to a standard would be, for example, where a person then installs class 0 or class 1 copper pipe underground. Standard clearly says you can't, but if you do that, it's going to corrode, it's going to cause a leak, and you're not following the installation or requirements within the standard. So poor anchoring of pipes, just think about a pipe that hasn't been anchored and it starts to have a lot of movement, and as there's draw off on that, the pipe starts to vibrate. Think about joints, think about those joints that are vibrating and moving, and at those points, that's where the abrasion's happening, and that's probably where you're going to find an acceleration of corrosion happening. On the other side of the screen that you're seeing, I've used the word decelerator, and those things that are basically trying to prevent the acceleration. I think it might be just important that we just touch on that just on a few points. The adherence to standards, as I mentioned, and then good plumbing practice is vital, it's key. Routine maintenance, think about things like anode replacements. Anodes there to protect the geyser from corrosion. So, if you continuously do the anode replacements, you're probably going to then obviously protect the cylinder from corrosion, and it is important. So routine maintenance, not just on a geyser, but on pipes and fittings are very important. You'll see I've got a little picture at the bottom there of a water meter. So as a consumer or as a plumber or someone listening today, just think about it. So if you've switched off all your taps and, now and then it's a good habit just to go and look at the water meter. If you're seeing it's turning, but all your taps and there is no draw-offs happening inside your premises at any of the terminal fittings, could indicate that you've got a water leak that may have caused from corrosion. So please just keep an eye on that. Loss of pressure could be another good indication that, there's a lot of corrosion happening. The aerators are being blocked and, filled up. So those are all little telltale signs that, that there could be, corrosion happening within the pipework or in the system of the plumbing. Strainers, very, very important. So if you install strainers, routine maintenance, clear them out. They catch that thing, as I mentioned, the hydraulic wear, and I hope I've explained it nicely to you. So you want to catch that debris. You don't want that debris to run along all the pipeline and get to the terminal fitting to be caught at the aerator. You want to try and catch that fairly up front, maybe way ahead before the water starts to go into the property through the pipes. So strainers are very important. They definitely help with protection of the pipes. And then obviously used protection material. So think about things like you'll see a little picture there of some Denso tape. So the wrapping of pipes is important. There's a non-galvanic action fitting that I've put there. So, you're connecting a galvanized pipe to a copper pipe. Use fittings like that that would then separate that galvanic action from happening. I've also put a picture of some glycol. So my understanding that, at the correct mixtures, glycol also lowers the effects of corrosion. So the boiling temperature, in other words, it lowers it, and therefore obviously would assist in preventing corrosion from happening. If you look at some of the glycol, it's got a very oily coating, and it's called a corrosion inhibitor. So those are very, very important things. And let me just see if we've missed anything on that list on the left-hand side. Stagnation. Incorrect products is one that I did just skip over or glance over. So think about up in Gauteng, we might use, let's say, a galvanized pipe, but that same galvanized pipe may not be a product that you would want to use at the coast. So when you're thinking of, installing pipes at the coast, we've got completely different to maybe that same galvanized pipe that would have a longer lifespan up here in Gauteng. So that's just to raise your attention. Look at the correct area, correct approved products that need to be used. Water quality, and I think we could move to the next one, please. Next slide. So, what could be causing water to turn blue? So I often get calls, Steve, consumers complaining, water's blue, water's brown, water's white, and I think it's a great opportunity to share the reasons what's causing that water to turn blue. And in most cases, it's due to corroded copper pipes and fittings and components. It's normally higher than normal copper levels. So the darker the blue that you see, so if you've got this water flowing into a basin, as you see on the top there, it's that light, beautiful aqua blue. Man, what it's really trying to tell you is that, you've got some copper ions that are dissolving into the water, and that's what's giving it that bluish. Some people even say it's like a greenish tint, but it's definitely that kind of tint. The picture at the bottom, I'm sure a lot of plumbers have seen that. And that's basically just corrosions, oxidization of copper happening. And it's got that blue and white kind of feel around the copper. It's almost like a caking or a baking of that around that specific picture there. If you take it off and you had to rub that into water, you'd probably find it's going to give you that bluish copper, bluish kind of feel that you're seeing in the top picture. Yes, it could stain laundry or clothes. It's a question I get sometimes. It can happen. I'm not too sure on sandware, but maybe over time it could also stain the sandware. But basically, you're seeing blue water as a professional out there. It's probably that you've got just this dissolved copper ions at a very high level, and that's what's causing the water to turn blue. Next slide, please. So what could be causing water to turn brown on the other scale of it? So picture that I've put in the bottom left is a picture where you can see the water is not dark brown as far right-hand pictures like showing brown or yellow, but it's got that tint of brown. And basically, the primary cause of that is rust. Now, when rust occurs, three things need to be present. So there's got to be metal or iron. You can have oxygen and water, and I think we all can agree that we're going to find plentiful in a hot storage water heater tank. So rusting also starts by oxidization, and it's basically when the iron loses its electrons to the oxygen within the water. And just think about it. We said earlier on that heat has a huge role to play with corrosion, and I think it's a perfect breeding ground, if I could use those words, within a hot storage water heater tank. Now, the rust could be opening the specific tap. The rust could be, for example, just coming from the storage tank, or it could be from the reticulation system complete, hot and cold. So just a good tip, which I work on, is basically if I'm opening up the hot tap and I'm finding this brownish water or this color coming out, I would assume that it's probably from the line, let's say from the mixer where I'm opening it up, to the pipe work from there to the geyser, and that it's potentially that piece of pipe that's corroded or the actual storage tank. If you're just opening up the cold and testing the cold, and the cold is nice and clear, it hasn't got any color or clear, brown or yellow color, it's definitely a possible indication that the storage tank needs to, need some maintenance, maybe anode, those kind of things. It's just a good, before you start, indication of what you need to start looking at and what you need to be focusing on. All right, Byron, next slide, please. So as mentioned, I'm just going to quickly touch on the hard and soft water. And I think it is important that I just quickly read to you, Byron, I can't see the top of that section. I just would like to read to that. I'm going to try and see if I could, you need to just make it a little bit, I don't know if our listeners could see that, but I've got a little block on the top. But I'm going to quickly refer you to SANS 10252, part 1, 7.1.3.2. Basically, it reads as follows. It says, in case of doubt, and speaking about the water quality, it says a complete water quality analysis shall be undertaken. And then the point I want to touch on is that the more common problems that are in hot water systems are scale formation, corrosion, biological growth, suspended solid matter on any combination of that. Problems can seriously reduce the heating efficiency of a system. And let me just stop there. So if you look at the picture, and for those that have taken out an element and it's been caked with this calcium, it looks like a lot of, it's almost like it's packed around the element. Imagine that heating capacity, how much energy you're going to need to heat through that element. So the element then goes into this calcium, and then this cake, in other words, caked on calcium, and then it only heats up the water. So it's less efficient. It takes longer to heat up it, and that's what it's trying to say, is that it can seriously reduce the heating efficiency in the system and can lead to premature failure of equipment and also create a hazard to the user. With an increase of temperature, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to have corrosion increasing because corrosive gases, as it says, such as oxygen and carbon dioxide, are released while the electron conductivity of the water is increased. So that being said, if you had to take a little bit of the picture on the left and you take that white stuff and you basically rub that with some water, or you put some of that into the water and you shake it up, it's going to give you that milky kind of look. But before we show you what's causing the water to go milky, let's just quickly touch on hard water. Is basically water where it has a high mineral content. So it contains a lot of magnesium and calcium ions. And I've put in the bottom there, it's that calcium carbonate. And if you have it tested and you get a reading of anything between 120 to approximately 180 milligrams a liter, you're basically in an area with hard water. You do find it often that, a lot of places where you've got a borehole, or in specific areas, you will find that when it gets tested, you'll have those kind of readings, and you definitely need to look at things like, maybe routine anode replacements, or looking at different applications where you might have had a magnesium, you now then need to look at an aluminium anode. On the other scale, you've got soft water, which is has less mineral content, but remember that it contains sodium ions. So think of sodium, sitting around sodium is salt. So, think of coasts, think about food. So salt and sodium. So what that tells you is that salt is very corrosive. So it's also very corrosive, but obviously the water is then deemed soft water. So another good tip that I could maybe give you is, if you are, trying to fault find, is always ask, can I have a look at a consumer's house? Could I just have a look at the kettle? It's a great source of information just to tell you what's happening. Is there a lot of calcium carbonate in the water? And is this in the hard water, or is it in a soft water? All right, next slide, please. So considering the previous slide, what could be causing water to turn cloudy or milky? Well, basically, it could be limescale buildup, it could be anode depletion or rapid anode depletion. If you look at the picture, I've just tried to show you what a sacrificial anode looks like, new, and then when it's worn out, it's thinned out, it's done its job, it's sacrificed itself to protect the geyser or cylinder or hot water cylinder from corrosion. And if you look on the left-hand side, the picture of what I was referring to, that white milky water that the consumers could be complaining about. You might find that when a client complains about that milky water, that they also complain about there's a pressure drop or reduced pressure at the terminal fittings, and that the water sometimes also has a smell. Now, that's normally, ladies and gents, a good indication of anode or accelerated anode depletion. So that water smell that they refer to, it's got a smell like rotten eggs, is basically the aluminium or magnesium on the anode reacting with the water. And that's basically what's causing that smell. And that sacrificial anode is producing a thing called hydrogen sulfide gas. And that is what that smell is. That's what's causing that rotten egg odor. So the milky water could indicate that the anode is, as I said, depleting faster than normal, creating that tiny, tiny little bubbles. So when you look through it like that in a glass, you think, oh, this is milky water. Basically clouded with those little bubbles. And that's what's affecting the water. Just a note on that hydrogen sulfide that I mentioned, hydrogen sulfide is flammable. And plumbers should exercise caution and safety. You know, if they come across that or the client's complaining, there's definitely a rotten egg smell. Now, I did have a little video just to show you what that splattering looks like, because you'll find that a lot of times, you know, that there's the excessive splattering at the taps, which is an indication that the anode is depleting. It's done its job or it's doing its job. It's just depleting at a very fast rate. And I do apologize. We're not able to get that up, I think, just because of its size. And I do apologize for that. But what happens is the anode's sacrificing itself. It's happening at a faster rate than normal. Could be for a host of things, as I mentioned up in my third slide. Think of those accelerators. And now the consumer opens the tap. The tap now says, well, I've got to get the water to out of the tap, but at the same time draws in that trapped air or air bubbles that are in the geyser, and that is what's being expelled at the taps, causing that splattering effect that the consumers complain about. And when we say there's something wrong, you know, there's air in the geyser, yes, it is, and it's being caused by that hydrogen sulfide gas or that anode doing its job, in other words. So I think, let me just have a look. No, I'm not able to open. I do apologize. It's actually quite a nice video that Byron, you're not able to open it on your side at all, correct?
No, sorry, I can't.
All right, I do apologize, ladies and gents. All right, can we move to the next slide? Ladies and gents, inspecting the aerator filters is such good practice. And it's a means of helping you as a professional fault finding what potential problems could be happening. Its contents, and as you can see from the pictures, I'm going to try and talk to both pictures and try and give you what we found or what I found in it. But it's a source of valuable information. Let me explain why I'm saying that. So if you look at the left picture, you'll see there that this specific consumer was complaining that the water in her bath looked brownish at the taps. And when I inspected the aerator, it showed me a mixed amount of debris. Now, if you look at the debris, I hope you can see the little white pieces, those little flakes, the calcium or calc, as some people might refer to it as. There's some brown little spots and pieces that are mixed amongst that. And that's basically some brown iron and corrosion that's lying in this aerator filter. And I don't know if you could see, there's one or two blue specks. So what had happened is that obviously the problem was resolved by considering first the quality of water. And yes, it was a consumer that was living in an area with hard water. So, you know, that was determined, but it didn't stop there. The anode was inspected. It was completely depleted. It was a zinc anode that was replaced with a more robust or a more noble metal, which is aluminium anode. So that obviously helped with the corrosion aspect of the anode. We found that there was some galvanic action between some copper pipe and some galvanized pipe was identified, and that was also addressed. The blue little speck that you see there, you may have seen this sometimes when you cut open a geyser, you'll find that it's got it's got a blue coating or enamel lining. For those who may know the name, it's called a vitreous lining, and basically it's an additional coating that gets put on the actual cylinder, and that is an additional protection above the anode. So that little specks that you see there was in fact small little chips of that enamel coating that was lying in this aerator's catchment area where the little filter was. So it's a very, very good indication. So we fixed it by obviously just doing all those extra things. And what we did stress to the consumer is routine maintenance, call the qualified professional plumber, and obviously let's extend the life of the system, the pipes, components, and the geyser. And then obviously moving to the right-hand side, here the consumer was complaining about very low pressure. Plumber had worked on the system. I think it was a geyser replacement, if I recall, but client was complaining very, very low pressure. On inspecting, the aerator filter was full of sand and grit, some iron particles, as you can see. This was a very easy fix, cleaning the filters and installing a strainer upstream and advising the client to do action maintenance or routine maintenance, solve the low pressure and the problems. Next slide, please. So, Byron, you there? So corrosion rate of galvanized steel, this is just a picture of galvanic action at play, is usually increased by traces of copper present in water. So what happens is dissolved copper ions stimulate corrosion of zinc coatings. So basically it affects it as those copper ions basically move from left to right. You'll see that it strips away the coatings of zinc inside the galvanized pipe. And if you see that that pipe has been installed incorrectly, the flow of water is from left to right. Dissolved copper ions basically eat away at that, and it causes that corrosion that you see in the picture. Picture on the right-hand side also shows you between the two dissimilar metals, the corrosion that is happening, and that is at play. So if you are installing, a good advice would be to always install copper fitting downstream of a galvanized fitting. Next slide, please. I was speaking earlier about next slide, poor installation. And absolutely, poor installation can lead to corrosion. So if you're looking at the picture, this specific plumber had used a nail to mount a copper pipe, and look there at the bottom there, the trickle of water that's spraying out, causing thousands and thousands of rands of damages. Had he just listened or just advised or consulted the standard, he would have realized that copper holder batts shall not be used for fixing steel pipes, and the same would apply. The copper pipes, you shouldn't have a steel holder batt supporting it, in this case a nail, because you're going to get this kind of thing where the corrosion happens and then you have leaks. So top right-hand corner, what the plumber should have used was a copper saddle onto a copper pipe or a normal anchor, plastic anchor, which obviously is the correct or the appropriate material. It's not going to cause corrosion. And I just want to read 8644, where it says pipe supports shall be the type of material appropriate to the pipe and shall be capable of withstanding the applied loads and shall be corrosion resistant when pipes are installed in locations exposed to corrosive conditions. Next slide, please. And this brings us basically to the last slide, guys. And ladies and gents, I want to say, I'm going to sum it up. I want to say corrosion is real and its impact is felt within the plumbing environment. Corrosion affects water bills, if not addressed. We lose precious water, is wasted because obviously, you've got this pipe that's leaking underground and no one's really focusing, but we're losing precious water. It affects costs. Routine maintenance is important, and obviously correct installation is key. Please use a qualified plumber. The installation needs to be done to the standards. used and approved fittings or pipes, and you can see I put CR and DZR. And all I want to say is that CR that you may see on the body of a component is corrosion resistant, and the DZR, and I may get this wrong, but it stands for dezincification resistance, and those are normally on a body indicating that they obviously a corrosion resistant type of component. And please, ladies and gents, the adherence to the standards is important. Top right hand, let me quickly run through it again. Blue water, corrosion of copper, pipes and fittings. Brown waters, rust. Remember, you look at metal pipes, components, the storage tank, that's just rust happening. White and cloudy water, lime scale, anode depletion. And remember, there could be a combination of this. So have things like the water quality checked and tested in your fault finding process. Please, it's good to just continuously promote good maintenance on plumbing. It is key, and it is vital. Ladies and gents, just thank you very much for your time. Today's session, as I said, merely touched on what watercolor could be signaling to us as plumbers, and I truly hope that it helps you in fault finding. If you need to drop me an email, or maybe you even have some nice pictures that you'd like to share with me, or have any additional points you'd like to bring across, please drop me an email. It's on top there. It's technical@iopsa.org. And then right at the bottom, before I take any questions, is always remember, conserve water. It's our most precious gift. Without it, we cannot survive. Please be a superhero and stop as many leaks as what you can. Please create awareness to its value. We are all custodians of this precious gift. So let's protect it together. And with that, I thank you and open for any questions. Byron.
Thank you very much. There currently aren't any questions. So ladies and gentlemen, if you do have any questions, please post it in the Q&A. We'll give it about 30 seconds just to see if there's any questions coming up. But thank you very much for today. Anything you'd like to add, Steve?
Just from our side, thank you very, very much for the opportunity to come share with you.
Anything you'd like to add, Steve Brown?
Yeah, I think, well done, Steve. I think you've covered it quite nicely and very intricate in terms of your explanations, and I'm sure that everybody in attendance has gained a huge amount of value out of it. So once again, thank you very much. And Byron, thank you very much for getting up early and getting us all sorted out this morning. Well done.
All right, thank you very much. I see we don't have any more questions, so we'll end the session. Thank you, and have a blessed